A cargo plane flying from Dubai skidded off the runway.
A cargo plane has skidded off the runway.
A Boeing 747 cargo jet skidded off the runway.
2 people are dead after an Emirates Sky cargo plane skidded off the runway.
Cargo plane has skidded off the runway at Hong Kong International Airport, crashing into the water, killing 2 people.
20th of October, 2025. As the clock strikes 3:50 in the morning, a massive Boeing 747 cargo jet screams down the runway at 90 knots at Hong Kong International Airport. The landing looks copybook perfect. Exactly the kind of landing that gets mentioned in training manuals as an example of doing everything right. But still, in the next few minutes, the entire tail section tears away from the fuselage, the nose crumples like a soda can, and the aircraft spins around 180 degrees. Caught in this panic, 2 people outside the plane die. But the 4 pilots who were in the cockpit somehow saved their lives. And when the chaos finally stops, the plane is sitting in Hong Kong Bay, facing backward. So what in the world could cause a perfectly good landing to turn into a catastrophic disaster in just 4,000 feet? This is the bizarre story of the Emirates Sky Cargo 9788, which showed the world that sometimes even perfection doesn't assure a great ending and can lead to a disaster. Monday, October 20th, local time, 3:52 in the morning. When the ACT Airlines Boeing 747 touches down on the runway, the weather is clear. Visibility is excellent, and the runway is clean. Every system at the airport works perfectly. The approach is routine. And the flight is on a standard ILS landing with just a mild crosswind from left to right. In the cockpit, the co-pilot flies while the captain monitors. This is textbook aviation. Within minutes, the wheels touch the pavement and the spoilers deploy exactly as designed. Auto brakes engage on schedule. Reverse thrust activates. Engines 2 and 3 provide up to 95% reverse power. And engine 1 goes to idle reverse, while engine 4, which was the faulty one right from the beginning, stays at idle because its reverser is broken and officially logged as inoperative. The pilots knew it even before the plane took off, and they still proceeded with this because, in a plane with 4 engines, 3 operational engines are manageable enough, even if the 4th engine remains inoperative. And as planned, everything else is functioning flawlessly. The auto brakes disconnect, which is normal when pilots apply manual braking. The pilot monitors calls out auto brakes. The pilot flying confirms with manual brake pressure. The sequence is perfect. But then the data captures something that should never happen. Just 30 seconds after touchdown, engine number 4 suddenly roars to life. And it goes to 90% forward thrust, not reverse. And that was the worst part. Because this means the plane, instead of slowing down, is now commanded to pick up speed. But every other engine is still in reverse or idle reverse, trying to slow the plane down. But engine 4 is fighting them alone, and that's why its positioning also becomes important. Engine 4 is an outboard engine on the right wing, so when one outboard engine produces massive forward power, while the others pull backward. According to the physics, the aircraft veers hard to the left. Because just imagine there's a plane whose left side is pulling it from behind and the right side is pushing it forward. And when you generate 2 opposite forces like that, it simply creates a rotational motion or spin. The same happened with this flight also. The captain feels the swing immediately. So he pushes all the thrust levers back toward idle, trying to kill the reversers and regain control. But engine 4 doesn't listen. It keeps accelerating until it reaches maximum takeoff thrust. As a result, the nose swings harder left. The captain is fighting the rudder, fighting the wheel. The aircraft is already sliding off the runway at taxiway Charlie 6. When the captain selects reverse again on engines 1, 2, and 3, it's already too late. the 747 crosses the airport perimeter. A security vehicle sits stationary ahead with 2 people inside, and the aircraft slams into it, shoving the vehicle into the sea. The plane then crashes through the perimeter fence and comes to rest partly submerged in water. When investigators arrive, one detail stops them cold. The speed brake lever sits in the flight detent position. That means the spoilers have retracted, and this can happen only when the aircraft thinks you want to take off again, which is called the go-around. Basically, the process goes like this. The system is programmed to recognize go-around intentions. If a thrust lever is pushed forward significantly, the aircraft assumes you're aborting the landing and you want to take off again. So it automatically folds back the spoilers to get the plane ready for takeoff. Naturally, the thing investigators went to check was the thrust levers, and they saw that the engines 1, 2, and 3 were fully closed. Their reversers are pulled to the maximum reverse position. But it was engine number 4 that told a completely different story. Its thrust lever was sitting at full forward power, which is called the takeoff position. When checked later, the flight data also confirmed what the physical evidence shows. But there's one thing that makes this accident so strange. A Boeing 747 thrust lever cannot be pushed forward on its own. After all, it's a mechanical system that needs a human command. So either someone's hand pushed it forward, or the auto throttle received a takeoff command. The most common cause would be accidental toga, or takeoff go-around mode activation. Just this one button press can tell the auto throttle to push forward thrust levers to power up. But that's also unlikely to happen, because pilots always keep their hands on the thrust levers during landing rollout. In fact, even though Engine 4's reverser was inoperative, the pilot's hand would naturally rest on that lever too. It's part of the set. You don't just hold 3 and ignore 1. So is it possible that in those critical seconds the hand slipped off Engine 4's lever, it moved into takeoff power, and nobody caught it? The preliminary report cannot explain why. It now stops at the biggest cliffhanger. How does a thrust lever move to full power without anyone seeing it or feeling it? How does an engine spool up to 107% thrust during a landing rollout without triggering an immediate reaction? This is what the preliminary report by the AAIB said about the crash. But we also need to keep in mind that oftentimes the preliminary reports change when the final report comes out. There are multiple examples of this, like Air France Flight 447 in 2009, Asiana Airlines Flight 214 in 2013, or TWA Flight 800 in 1996. So there's still room for other reasons that's not mentioned in the preliminary report at all, but could be a possible reason behind what happened. If you remember, the data shows the flight slow from 134 knots to 90 knots over 4,000 feet. That's actually slower than normal, and after landing, most aircraft would be down to 60 knots or less, ready to exit onto a taxiway. But this Boeing 747 is still maintaining 90 when it suddenly veers hard left. Now, there could be 2 reasons for this, and either a nose gear that may have collapsed under the stress, or maybe it was a main landing gear failure, but neither of them could explain the missing tail. A collapsed nose gear makes the plane skid forward on its belly instead of ripping the entire tail section off. On the other hand, a failed main gear might cause a spin, but the tail should stay attached. And the most surprising part comes when you look at the photos. The plane has visible damage on the nose, but it's impact damage, not collapse damage. The kind that comes from the aircraft slamming into the ground repeatedly with enormous force. But on the contrary, this flight's approach was extremely stable. So where did all that violent force come from? The answer is hiding in plain sight, and it is the nightmare of every pilot. We are talking about something called porpoise landing. And this will explain everything that happened to this 747. But that's just the chain reaction of something which started long before, when ACT Airlines decided to fly a plane under an Emirates call sign. And that detail is more important than you might think. The thing is, Emirates needs more cargo capacity. Their own 747s aren't built yet. So they started taking aircraft, fuel, crew, and everything on rent. In aviation, this is called a wet lease. Now, this specific plane was rented from a Turkish company named ACT Airlines. Naturally, it came with Turkish pilots, Turkish training, and Turkish maintenance standards. Emirates just writes a check to the ACT and uses its call sign for its cargo operation. So on the radio, it was Emirates 9788. But actually, it was entirely a flight of ACTR Airlines. However, on this fateful day, this Boeing 747 is coming into one of the busiest cargo airports in the world, Hong Kong, because it sees more Boeing 747s and Airbus A380s than almost anywhere else on the planet. During the landing, the crew of this aircraft requests an unrestricted arrival. This means they want to come in fast, because below 10,000 feet, the global speed limit is 250 knots everywhere on Earth. But if you ask permission and get approval, you can go faster. Just because high-speed arrivals save time and keep traffic flowing in busy airports like Hong Kong. So the Hong Kong Airport Control approves it immediately.
Kong approach, good night, Emirates 9788, descending flight level 110, unrestricted, inbound, contact.
Emirates 9788, runway 07F, turn at direct lines, meeting high speed.
Direct line, and runway U06 left, and high speed approach, Emirates 9788.
The audio recordings in the cockpit are completely normal. The ADS-B data, which is like a GPS tracker for aircraft, tells the same story. When you go to any flight tracking websites like FlightAware, they basically pick up this ADS-B data and display it for anyone to see. And according to that data, this approach is completely by the book. Emirates 9788 indeed came in a little hot at first, but they slowed down to normal approach speeds well before touchdown. Plus, the runway at Hong Kong is very long, so they had plenty of room to slow down and plenty of room for error. But still, at the 5,000-foot mark on the runway, something goes catastrophically wrong. The aircraft suddenly veered hard left. 90 knots of momentum carried them through grass and dirt. Just like that, they smash into the seawall, spinning around. Now the question is narrowed down and revised. What caused the violent turn that killed 2 people and destroyed a 747? And that takes us to the 2 incredible things that happened to this flight. If you look at the nose damage, it clearly points to the impact of some massive force. Similarly, for a tail section to completely separate from a 747, you need massive structural stress. But these Boeing 747s are built to withstand incredible forces. They fly through hurricanes and land in crosswinds that would flip a car. Literally, they're designed to flex and bend without breaking. So what kind of force can rip the tail off a 747? Let's run through the possibilities. Nose gear collapse? No. That causes forward skidding, not tail separation. Then the main gear collapsed, maybe it causes a spin, but the tail should stay put. So could it be brake failure? That would cause a runway overrun, but not structural failure. How about thrust reversers malfunctioning? Well, there was not enough asymmetric thrust to cause this kind of damage. So none of the standard runway accident scenarios explains what happened here. This isn't a simple mechanical failure or pilot error, either in the traditional sense. This is entirely something else, something that connects the perfect landing to the destroyed nose, to the missing tail, to the sudden violent turn at 90 knots. And this can happen again when an aircraft lands flat instead of nose up, and when all three landing gear points touch simultaneously instead of the mains touching first. The aircraft isn't designed to land that way. It's designed to ease in on the main gear first, then gently lower the nose. But instead, when you land flat on all 3 points at once, physics takes over, which doesn't care about your flight manual. And this is what happens. First, the aircraft bounces, like going back into the air. And when it comes down, if the nose hits first, it pops the nose back up. Then the main gear slams down, which bounces the whole aircraft again, and each bounce is more violent than the last. So this way, the oscillations build while the impacts get harder, faster, and more destructive. It's like riding a mechanical bull at a bar, which starts gently, then gets wild, and eventually throws you off. This is what we call a porpoise landing, named after the way dolphins and porpoises jump in and out of the water. And it explains everything. While porpoise landings are every pilot's nightmare, the good part is that most pilots will never experience one in their career. But when it happens, it can destroy an aircraft in seconds. If you fly a much smaller aircraft, let's say something like P-3, even that can be seriously damaged by porpoising. Now scale that up to a fully loaded Boeing 747, and the forces involved become absolutely massive. Each bounce transfers thousands of pounds of force into the nose gear, main gear, fuselage, and tail section. Normal landings absorb these forces gradually. Because the main gear touches gently, the weight transfers. The nose lowers gently, brakes engage smoothly. Thrust reversers activate, speed bleeds off. Everything happens in a controlled, predictable way. And the aircraft becomes a big tricycle rolling down the runway. But a porpoise landing throws all that control out the window. And the ADS-B data can't show us the pitch attitude of the aircraft during landing. All it shows is a stable approach and a normal touchdown point. That's why it looks like a perfect landing. But if it was a truly perfect one, by the 5,000-foot mark on the runway, the plane would be slower than 90 knots. Then why was the plane going so fast even at that point? The simple answer is that they were not smoothly rolling on all 3 gear points. They were bouncing. Each time the aircraft went back into the air, even for a split second, the wheels weren't on the ground. No ground contact means no braking friction. The pilots were probably fighting the controls. But once a porpoise landing starts, especially in a heavy aircraft, stopping it is nearly impossible. So somewhere around the 5,000-foot mark, after 4,000 feet of increasingly violent bouncing, the nose slams into the runway with catastrophic force. That's when the nose gear collapses, or maybe it was already collapsing from previous impacts. Either way, the nose crushes into the ground. While the nose was being destroyed, the tail section was experiencing its own nightmare. Each bounce transferred force through the entire fuselage. The tail is the furthest point from the main gear, so it acts like a whip where the forces amplify. It took just one more massive impact due to one more violent bounce, and the structural limits were exceeded. And the tail section crack started to separate. That's when the aircraft veered hard left, because suddenly the tail wasn't providing its normal aerodynamic and structural stability. The aircraft became unbalanced and uncontrollable. Still traveling at 90 knots with a cracked tail, the laws of physics take over in a terrifying new way. Understanding the situation, the pilots deployed the emergency slides. The rafts inflated, and 4 crew slid down to safety in the bay. They were definitely in shock and injured, but at least they were alive. While 2 other people outside the plane weren't so lucky. 2 airport patrol workers in a pickup truck were doing their job, driving the perimeter, checking the fences, making sure everything is secure. They were beyond the runway boundary in a completely safe area. No aircraft has any reason to be where they were until this 747, full of momentum, came spinning through the grass and dirt at 90 knots. No wonder it seemed like the plane just came that way to kill them. The aircraft ran them over. Impact was brutal. As the pickup truck was crushed, one worker died immediately, while the other was pulled from the wreckage but died at the hospital shortly after. This is extremely weird to think that two innocent people lost their lives through absolutely no fault of their own. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time by luck. The official investigation will take months, maybe years, but the evidence we got already points in one direction, and experienced pilots can see it clearly in the wreckage pattern. Now the thing is, could any of this have been prevented? Absolutely. Porpoise landings are preventable. They're caused by landing technique, when the plane lands nose up on the main gear first, and a porpoise landing simply can't happen. But they're also easy to accidentally trigger. One moment of landing too flat, one instant of not having the nose high enough, and physics takes over. Does it also mean there was also any pilot error? Maybe. It could also be a gust of wind at the wrong moment. Only the investigation will determine the root cause. But the mechanism of the accident is clear to anyone who understands porpoise landings and looks at the evidence. Initially, investigators couldn't find the tail because it's underwater. Hong Kong Bay sits next to the runway. The aircraft stopped partly in the water, and the tail, thrown outward during the spin, would have continued into deeper water and sunk immediately. But they found it on the 24th of October, and finding the tail will reveal fracture patterns, breakpoints, and stress signatures. Metallurgy will show whether the breaks were sudden or progressive, and what forces caused them. The full confirmation, however, will come from the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder. The FDR will show pitch attitude, bounces, oscillations, and increasing vertical loads during the crucial 4,000 feet. The CVR will reveal whether the pilots recognized the bouncing, attempted corrections, considered a go-around, or simply had no time to react. Now, could there be some other reasons too, apart from the porpoise landing? Yes, there could be. Investigations sometimes uncover unexpected failures or rare defects, but the approach was normal and stable. But one thing is sure, that the disaster unfolded only after touchdown, over 4,000 feet of runway, leaving a destroyed nose, a missing tail, a full aircraft spin, and 2 fatalities. It's very unlikely for several unrelated failures to happen at the exact same time in the exact order needed. However, the experts are already discussing the case as a lesson in landing technique. The pilots always need to touch down with the main gear first, keep the nose high, lower it gently, and never land flat on all 3 points. If you do, the outcome can be disastrous. What do you think really happened in those 4,000 feet where a perfect landing unraveled into chaos? Was this a hidden mechanical flaw waiting to strike, or a split-second landing misjudgment that turned physics into an enemy? Tell your thoughts in the comments, and if you want more deep dives like this, hit subscribe and stay with us for the next investigation.